Welcome to another episode of Inside Morgan County. I'm joined here with Dean Mayfield with Mayfield Insurance Group. And one of the reasons we started Inside Morgan County is just to tell the story, some untold, some told. But Morgan County is a unique place. I want to start out by just getting to know you a little bit. Where were you born?
Right here in Mooresville.
In Mooresville. And,
well, actually, I was born in Indianapolis, but came here my first year. So I've basically lived in Mooresville.
Lived here your whole life?
Morgan County my whole life, yeah.
So that's what, 38 years?
38 years plus. Yeah.
38 years plus.
61 just a few days ago.
61 years.
Yeah.
So tell me about your childhood a little bit. Obviously, you lived here in Mooresville. Tell me about your mom and dad a little bit.
Mom worked for RCA.
Okay.
Was an executive secretary there. And my dad worked for Allison, the aircraft side. Mm-hmm. And did a variety of different things over the years. Ended up in a supervisory position, running a building that they had where they did overhauling of, believe it or not, C-130 engines. Yeah, so He was the guy that if one of them had an issue anywhere, really probably in the world, but I know in the United States, he would have to go out with the national safety people and try to figure out what failed.
Wow.
And
important job.
It was, and he was one of the last guys to be able to work on the hub that those propellers go into. He was one of the last guys.
Really?
So he had to retrain some folks because obviously that was pretty old technology, but they still use it today.
Do they really? Still today?
They still, yeah, C-130 can take off in like a football field or something. Maybe it's 2 football fields, but a very really short span and with a lot of weight in it. So they've not found anything to replace that.
Okay. So are you an only child, or how many brothers and sisters?
I got a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest.
Okay.
So I've got a sister who's the middle child and a younger brother.
Are they still around here?
My sister actually lives in the home we grew up in here in Mooresville. She moved back from the Indianapolis area with a couple of stepkids who were struggling in the IPS school system, and she thought that this would be a better fit, and it turns out it was. And then my brother is in a little town called Arab, Alabama, which is down around Lake Gunnersville, south of Huntsville. And he's a commercial electrician by trade and takes care of a bunch of property management issues for a big company down there that owns all kinds of commercial buildings.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were a Mooresville pioneer? Graduated from there what year?
Well, 1979.
1979.
It was a great year.
I was born in 1980.
Well, and believe it or not, 1979 was the largest class to graduate from Mooresville High School.
Really?
At that time, and still today.
Still today?
Yeah.
How many?
It was almost 400, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
So we had a large class, so yeah.
Were you involved in extracurricular activities?
I played basketball up till my sophomore year, tore a knee, ran track, tore my knee.
Yeah.
And then just didn't,
Yeah.
I actually started working then, probably the end of my sophomore year, and have never stopped.
Really?
Yeah.
So when did you get involved in the insurance industry? Did you go off to college after high school?
I did for like a semester.
Okay.
Hated it. Went to IUPUI, and it's one of those things where you think you know everything, and I'm like, well, why can't I take these classes? Because you got to take these classes first. And I go, but I know all of those things. And so it just wasn't a fit for me. And I had worked in high school. I'd worked for Jack and Carolyn Ward here in Mooresville, Wards Apparel. Great people, still friends of mine, and learned a lot of people skills, learned a lot about people, how not to judge somebody. When the farmer comes in and he's covered in horse manure and but wants to buy 4 suits and pay cash, you quickly learn that you just cannot tell.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
You can't.
No.
And really learned a good work ethic there. Left there and went to work for Don Davis, infamously of Don's Guns.
Oh, yeah.
And worked there. And while those two folks are completely opposite in so many ways, the work ethic wasn't. And so I learned that work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard, you know, and treat everybody, you know, the way you want yourself to be treated. And so it was a great lesson. It's actually where I met Peggy, was at the gun store on
That's
the range.
awesome.
Yeah, I was her instructor. So, yeah, a long time ago, 37 years ago. So,
Well,
yeah.
let's go there. Tell me about that story.
So she, it's very funny. She came in with her brother and 2 friends. And obviously her brother looked something like her, but the 2 friends didn't. But her brother, you know, they were both had the same last name, and I'm like, are they married? Are they not married? Do I really care? You know, she's kind of cute, you know. So I'm her instructor out on the range, and we get all done, and I'm really busy, and I can't get over there to say anything to her. So I send one of my people that work for, I was manager of the store, and I said, hey, run this over there and give her some free range time and tell her to come back in. Well, she's so naive at, you know, 19, 20 years old, that she tells her brother and her friends, hey, look, they gave us free range time. We can all come back. No, not really. I didn't want the rest of them to come back. So then I quickly realized that, you know, she wasn't married, and we went out, and I tell the story that, you know, I didn't know a little Catholic girl could find her way back, and once she found her way down to Mooresville, she was never leaving. So, but you know, 37 years later, and four boys, and
wow,
we're blessed. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have had a great life. So, when did you get into the insurance industry?
I started in 1982. I needed a job, and I had some really good friends that I grew up knowing through my dad, through the Optimist Club, actually. And they were in the insurance business. They'd been life insurance agents for Commonwealth, and then they started a little PNC agency up on the west side. And Phil Chance and Dale Morgan, both of them long gone. And they said, well, why don't you try this? And I go, you know, insurance, man. No, that's boring, you know? And so Phil called one day, and he goes, I made you an appointment. You got to go out and meet the guy on the west side at the little life office. And I go out there, and I take the test. I, you know, ace the test, you know, and they hire me. I worked there about 18 months, and life insurance was just up and down. 1 week you'd sell 10 policies, 1 week you wouldn't sell anything, and you had no income. I mean, it was like up and down, you know. And so I'm like, yeah, I don't think this is really for me. And there was an opportunity to go to work at, Peggy worked for a subsidiary of Mayflower Moving Company. And they had an insurance agency and a risk management department, obviously took care of all their trucks and buildings around the country. And they called and hired me, and I worked there from 1985 to 1989. And Mayflower was going through a reorganization. There was a company out of Canada that wanted to come in and buy our bus division. And when they say a hostile takeover, I know what a hostile takeover is. I mean, it was
really,
oh my God, there was people in the building were so unhappy because it's almost like you can't stop it. I mean, if they agree to pay enough for your stock, they own you. And you know, Mayflower had been a family-owned business. I mean, there were some other stockholders, but most of the top 5 people were all family members.
Wow.
So it was a pretty turbulent time, and I told a gentleman that called on our agency that worked for American States. I said, "Hey, I'm not long for here. I mean, I can see that handwriting on the wall. You know, why don't you see if there's somebody that has an agency in Indianapolis or South that, you know, would maybe be a fit." And he called me. It was like 2 weeks later. He called me and he goes, "Hey, I got a guy. He's buying an office in Mooresville. He had a guy that was going to manage it. The guy backed out. I think the two of you ought to meet." And so we did. And I never will forget it. I told Peggy, I said, "I'm going to meet this guy on Saturday." The guy wanted to meet me that day, and I said, "I'm at work. I mean, you know, I can't just take off."
Yeah.
You know, but I could. He'd already committed to buying the agency and had nobody to run it.
Sure.
And so I said, let's meet Saturday. So we met. So I thought, well, I had come up with some things that, that I got to have. So I had made a list of 10 things that I thought were, kind of on the edge, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And so we sat there talking, and I said, I have to have this, and I have to have this. Went through the list, and he goes, yeah, I can do all that. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Then you wonder if you should have been a little more aggressive.
So then I came up with 5 more. I'm pretty good on my feet sometimes. I came up with 5 more that I thought were just outrageous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do those too. Well, then I couldn't think of anything else. I'm like, I'm at a loss. And I go, okay. He goes, when can you start? And I go, well, I'll have to give 2 weeks notice on Monday. So I go home and I tell Peggy, I said, I'm quitting Monday. She goes, I thought we were going to talk about it. And I said, well, we had those 10 questions or 10 things. She goes, yeah. And I go, well, he agreed to those like in the first 10 minutes. She goes, and I go, came up with 5 more. And he agreed to those. She goes, well, then what'd you do? I said, yes. I couldn't think of anything else,
That's great.
So he and I were partners. We had 4 locations at the time, and we bought probably, 10 or 20 agencies around Indianapolis, and did that from 1989. February of 1989, I came back down here, and in 1994, he and I parted ways, and it was a scary time, but I've never looked back, and we've acquired other agencies. The one thing I learned from Don Davis, owner of Don's Guns, was it's not the best thing to have multiple locations.
Oh.
And so I tell people that first year my gross income dropped like a rock, but my net income went up. Because I didn't have 4 expenses for telephones. I didn't have 4 expenses for yellow. We did Yellow Page advertising. You probably don't remember what that is, but we had big advertising in Yellow Pages, and it was it was thousands a month, and we had that times 4, and staff and just all kinds of stuff.
Electric bills, gas bills,
everything,
yeah.
and so we parted ways, and I was down here. It was a much smaller operation, and had an opportunity in 2006 to buy the Coleman agency that had been here. He'd been my scoutmaster, so I'd talked to him several times, and we had a horrible hailstorm. It was horrible, worst one I've ever in my career that I've ever seen. And I saw Paul one day, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm going next door to the." It was like a little like a Keller office supply, but it was here. I said, "What are you doing over there?" And he goes, "I'm going to fax these claims in." I said, "Well, I can tell you that those fax machines at American States and auto owners, they're not working because they can't keep up with the demand for it." The storm hit Greenwood, Mooresville, Martinsville, and part of the west side of Indianapolis.
Oh, wow.
It was horrible. But the losses in my office alone were over $2.5 million. It was. I chuckled and said, the Mooresville revitalization, I did more in one night with this storm than they had done in 10 years, jokingly, because everybody got new roofs, everybody got new siding, everybody got new everything. It was crazy. But he said, "Well, how are you doing yours? How are you doing your claims?" And I said, "Well, I drive up in the morning and take the ones from the afternoon, then I go to auto owners in Pekin because they're right next to each other, and then I drive downtown to American States. I drop them off." And he looked at me, and I go, "Well, if you want me to take your..." And I said, "I'm going twice a day. That's how many I've got."
Wow.
I'm going in the morning, and I'm going late in the afternoon. And I said, "And if you want me to take yours, just bring them down." And he looked at me, and he said, "You'd do that?" And I go, "Well, if you were going down to American States, you'd take mine." It's like, I'm not going to steal your clients, for God's sake. At this point, we're all in the same boat.
Right.
And so he called me, and I'd asked him several times about buying his agency. He called me one day, and he says, I want you to come down because I want to talk to you about buying the agency. I said, "Right now?" And he goes, "Now." And you just had to know Paul that. So I walked down there, down 2 blocks, walked in. I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" He said, "This is how much I want for it. This is how I want you to pay me, and there's no negotiation." And I go, okay, I'll take it. And I walked back down, and Peggy said, I said, I just bought an agency. She goes, shouldn't we be talking about this? And I go, no. I mean, so the only thing she's ever said to me in all of these, I mean, she signed for some some loans and stuff, and the only thing she ever said was, I'm not going to lose my house, am I? And I go, nope. And so we just made the last payment on this building that we're in.
That's
we
great.
Just made the last payment on a contract, and I've got one more contract, and then we have no debt at the agency here. So it's kind of a nice feeling. There was times where it was a little rough. I'll be honest,
Sure.
you know. But
That's the story of small businesses.
yeah, you know, and the relationships with the banks. I mean, they've changed over the years. But I always said when you needed to borrow money, they really didn't want to loan you money, and then when you don't need any money, they're all willing to loan you money.
Yep.
But along the way, it worked out. But yeah, it was. She when we bought this building, she had to sign it. She had to sign for that, and I wrote a check, and my dad was there, and my dad says, I have never written or seen a check that large, and I go, it doesn't hurt after the first one. You know, it's just they're just numbers, and you just in my mind, I always knew. Well, I always hoped that you're working towards a goal of getting to a point where no matter how hard it was to make those payments all along the way, at some point there's light at the end of the tunnel, and they'll all go away. So it's like having a second income with, you know. So it's pretty nice now.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
there were years, there were struggles for sure.
So we're sitting here surrounded by trains.
Yes,
So let's talk about, obviously it's a hobby of yours.
yes.
When did you get into it?
So my dad grew up and had the O-scale Lionel trains when he was a kid, and then so when we were growing up, he had them then. So I was interested when I was a kid. And like a lot of kids in that 60, 70 time frame, we liked slot cars too. And so kind of went from big Lionel trains to slot cars to the smaller HO scale, which is half the size of this. And then kind of lost interest. You know, I mean, it was cars and girls and guns and, you know, just stuff.
Sure, yeah.
You know. And so the oldest two boys came along, and they would go to my dad's, and he'd build a Lionel layout in his garage again. In fact, guy that was here earlier, my electrician, said he never remembered a time that I could ever get a car in my dad's garage.
Oh, wow.
Because he always had trains in there. And I
Okay.
said, yeah, I could pull in like the nose and work on the front end of it, but I could never get a whole car in it because it was never really a garage.
A garage, yeah.
But he had those, and so my kids, when they were probably 2 and 3, they would go over there and they'd stay with my mom during the day, and my dad had the Lionel trains, so they said one year for Christmas they wanted trains, so my dad bought some trains for them. Well, he didn't buy the O scale; he bought the bigger Thomas the Train. In fact, I've got them here: Thomas the Train and Thomas and James the red engine from Thomas the Train set. And so they had those, and one day they said, "No, we want real trains like Grandpa's." And I'm like, "What?" And they go, "Like Grandpa's." So I had none. So 28 years ago, I didn't have any of this.
Oh, wow.
And so my dad said, well, here's one that when you were a kid you played with, and you can have that. So I started out with that. Then that Christmas he bought a set for them. And then it just spiraled, probably out of control a little bit. There's
You've got a lot.
And I've got 4 times this many downstairs in boxes. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a college education set in here.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've got, over on the one wall, I've got some older from the 1950s, 1960s, mostly 50s. Some of them were my dad's. Some of them were just things that, we liked and we bought. And I tell people, what can you buy that's 60 or 70 years old and still works just like it did when it was new? There's hardly anything,
Yep.
And so we have some old stuff and the new stuff. And it was funny because like this purple one here, when it came out, the boys didn't see it. And then they saw it and they said, we really like that purple train. Well, that purple train, I forget what I ended up paying, and I forget where every place we went, we would stop at a train store. And I'd say, do you have that Atlantic Coastal? No. So I finally found it. And when I did, we got it. And so it was just kind of fun. I mean, we would travel and we would look for, little hobby stores and go in, and we'd find some things here or there. Peggy one year was looking for a Ferris wheel, and she finally found it out someplace, and she got it. So,
do the boys still have that love for them?
They're
all grown now.
They're all grown. 30, 29, 26, and 19. I would say when we have Victorian Christmas, if they were all here, they would come and they would participate during the day. They all know how to operate them, kind of like them. But two of my boys are overseas.
Right.
So when my dad passed away, the one said, I want all of Grandpa's stuff. All of Grandpa's stuff is downstairs in a room boxed up. So maybe at some point they'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But they're all living their lives doing different things.
Right. But maybe it'll come back around similar to like it did with you. When they have kids.
When they have kids. If they ever have kids.
If they ever settle down. And
I got to get them to get wives first, Girlfriends,
Someone of the opposite sex that's interested.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I tell people, when I was growing up, to go to Florida was a big deal. Two of them have lived overseas for, their sophomore years of high school. They were 11 months overseas in Taiwan. One of them went back to Japan his senior year of college. One lives in Japan and has been in Tokyo for the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years now. He didn't come back because of COVID for a visit. And then number two son, who's just like me. I mean, of the four, there's only one that acts like me, looks like me. It is me. Unfortunately, he's like me sometimes. And he's in Barbados, and he just about this time last year, says, I'm moving to Barbados, and I thought he was kidding. He wasn't kidding. He's there, and
wow.
He sends me pictures every once in a while. He's out he lives 2 blocks off the beach.
So what did you do? What did you and Peggy do as you were raising your children that instilled the desire or the freedom in them to spread their wings like that?
I think about that a lot because maybe I wouldn't have done that. So, honestly, I miss the two of them. The one I hardly hear from. Because the time difference in Japan.
Oh,
when
sure.
It's 4:00 here. It's 4 a.m. there. So. I hear from him, but I would really say we decided to host and be an exchange student family.
Oh, okay.
And they came and they interviewed us, and it's a very lengthy interview process. They want to make sure that you can provide a bed and food, and
right.
You're not some serial killer or whatever, perverts. And so it's a lengthy, which I was appreciative of.
Sure.
And so they were, through Rotary, we were going to host one. And the lady was there. She said, has any of your boys ever thought about going? Well, she was talking to the oldest one, Christopher. And he goes, I don't have any interest. And Andrew walked by and he goes, yeah, I'll go. That's it. Yeah, I'll go. And I thought, yeah, right. Well, you change your mind like every 5 minutes about whatever,
Yeah.
Well, the next thing I know, he's doing the application. He's doing the interview. There's an interview process locally. There's an interview process regionally. There's an interview process at the state level. And it was like that. And the next thing I know, he's going to Taiwan.
Oh,
he's
wow.
a sophomore in high school. He's 15 years old, and he lives
Wow.
abroad for 11 months.
How did you and Peggy handle that?
It was crazy. I knew through the Rotary program that he would be okay, but he didn't speak any Mandarin, which is
sure.
the language. I mean, not a lick. And the family that he stayed with at first, they say that they're fluent in English. Well, they weren't fluent in English, and he had a lot of freedom to roam Taipei, which is one of the largest cities in the world.
Okay.
Very cool city, old and new. But so when he came back, to have rules at our house, let's just say it was very difficult because he'd been 11 months, basically could do whatever he wanted to do.
Right.
As a 15,
As
16,
a 15-year-old, yeah.
15, 16-year-old. He turned 16 while I was there. They had rules, but, it was a lot of freedom.
Right.
So he came back and he talked about it and what fun it had been. And then the third son, Austin, said, well, I think I'd like to do it. And it just ended up, when you're under, I think it's under 16 years old, I think is the age requirement. The Asian countries are the only ones you can go to. So you're going to go to Japan or you're going to go to Taiwan. And to go to Germany, you have to have 3 years of German. You have to be fluent in German. Or to go to Spain, I think you have to have a couple years. So Japan doesn't have any, or Taiwan didn't have any requirements. They just immerse you in the language and teach you the language pretty quickly.
Wow.
So both of them speak Mandarin. Austin speaks Japanese. They both spoke pretty good Spanish from the Spanish classes here.
Yeah.
Mr. Maxwell.
Wow.
He'd get in arguments with him, and he says, I don't know whether they're cussing at me in Mandarin, but he says they can flip from Mandarin to Spanish to English, and he goes, I can't keep up. I was like, yeah, I know what you're saying. So, but I guess it was just that. I didn't travel when I was their age. Like I said, to go to Florida was a big deal. And so to be halfway around, travel halfway around the world several times, and to be living abroad now,
Right.
It's just different,
Well, let's go from Japan and the Asian countries all the way back here to Morgan County.
Okay.
And let's talk about what makes Morgan County so special.
I think the people, really, when you get down to it, the whole county is full of a lot of really, really great people. And, every county has some people that are probably not the nicest.
Sure. Yep.
But everybody has that.
Yep.
But I'd say by and large, the majority of people that you meet, despite some of the things that get said about the county or a particular city or anything, town, I've not found that to be the case. I found that, growing up, especially growing up, people would help you if you needed help. If your car broke down on the side of the road, somebody was pulling over to help you fix it. And didn't worry about a lot of the stuff that you probably do worry about today. We might have been naive about that back then.
Yeah, maybe.
I used to ride my bike from right here in town all the way out to Spring Lake, or South Lake, which is all the way out past Man Road on 144.
Oh, wow.
Today, I would not let my kid out on 144 because of the traffic.
Right, yep.
But we would ride out there. It was three of us, and we would ride out there. And the riding out was easy because it was all downhill and we were young. You swim all day. We'd call my mom, and she'd have to come get us in the station wagon. We'd load bikes in the back of the station wagon. She'd bring us home. But, just things you did back then. But
I think that's the world now. I used to ride my bike. I grew up in Martinsville.
Yeah.
I'd ride all over the place. There's not a chance I'd let my kids do that now.
The traffic is horrible.
Yeah.
And people just tend not to pay attention, I think,
Yeah.
as much. But no, I would say the people throughout the county, and I've met a lot of people throughout the county because of Peggy's position that I probably would have never had a reason to meet before. And there's some pretty unique people. There's a lot of small industry that goes on that I never knew was here.
Yeah.
You know, Grays or Wards or things that you drive by,
Right.
or in Martinsville, used to be Harmon Motive and things like that. You knew those because they were big, but there's all kinds of smaller little industries throughout our county.
There is 2 examples. One, I was driving with my nieces by Twig in Martinsville.
Yes.
They said, "What's this building?" And I got to explain it to them. Now, one of them's a senior in high school, and she said, "I had no idea that even existed."
Right.
And then Shields Designs in Martinsville,
Yeah.
they do the plaques for the Fall Foliage Festival, and I'm on that committee. And so I went over there to pick some up, and I took my son, and he saw that they did the plexiglass for the monorails for Disney World and Disneyland,
Yes.
and the motorcycle shields and stuff. He had no idea that was right here in Morgan County.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, so I was like, I need to do an interview with them, because probably there's a lot of people that don't know that.
Right. They started doing those motorcycle shields, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it was I had one. I had
Do
one.
you?
I had one on a motorcycle because to buy a full fairing was like say $600 or $700, and you could buy this plexiglass thing that was kind of a universal adjustment for $120. I don't know what it was.
Significantly less.
Significantly less.
Yes.
And it did the same thing. It broke the wind and kept the bugs off of it.
Exactly. And that's really all you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, Brad, and his parents, and then Brad now,
Yeah.
and they've diversified and make some other, things
Right.
There. But yeah, well kept secret. We've got some machine shops located in the county that make a lot of medical devices that, till you go in there, you're like, what's that?
Right.
What is that little part that you make?
Right.
And,
So you're the first interview that we've done from someone that's actually in Mooresville. So I grew up in Martinsville. It was easy to know people there, but I wanted to spread our wings because this is inside Morgan County.
right.
But there's a line. There's a magic line when you drive up 67 or drive down 67. Talk to me about that a little bit. What's that about, and how can we erase it?
Well, I've tried.
Have you?
I have. I think that line, back when I was in high school, Mooresville, Martinsville, Mooresville, Monrovia, Martinsville, Monrovia, huge rivalries. Football, basketball, everything. Mainly basketball and football, but pretty much all athletics. And I think that athletic part just transcended to everything. And I really don't know. I would say the other thing is that Mooresville and while Martinsville is a county seat,
Right.
for a number of years there's been a lot more growth and things going on in Mooresville. And I think Mooresville has felt a little underserved from on the county council. They have one permanent seat, and of the 4 that are permanent, one of them is a Mooresville area, and then obviously they have the 3 at large. And so I just think that there's been that back and forth on both sides. I think that when Peggy got elected, when Peggy became clerk, there was that sort of bringing people together because I knew people from up here, we knew people from down there. We'd be having something, and we'd say, "Hey, why don't y'all show up?" And so we did that. And then even as the state rep, we've done that even more. And I think that has helped. Just the fact that I was a Morgan County resident, our businesses in Mooresville, and grew up in Mooresville and know so many people. But and actually Kim Meredith and I were talking about it earlier today. And what do you do? How do you bring those people together? And I think it really I think on both ends, some of them just don't try as hard. It's just easier to stay in your own little cocoon,
Sure.
if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not an invisible line. It's a real line. It's really there.
I have, and I don't want to go down a political route, but I have appreciated the fact that the mayor of Martinsville tries to make it to Mooresville meetings and
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have appreciated that. And
Yeah.
it's a small gesture. Not
Yeah.
sure what it does necessarily, but it's a gesture in the right direction.
Well, and I know Kim is the chairman or president of the county council. She comes to the Mooresville council meetings. I know Dustin Stanley from the Mooresville Town Council participates in some stuff in Martinsville, and it's
Okay.
a start. But everybody's got, their own lives, and so you're an elected official on a council. It's hard to maybe want to go and sit through somebody else's meeting when
Right.
you got your own issues that you're trying to
And your own
deal with.
life, and we're way
Right.
busier than we were even 20
yeah.
years ago. We have too much to do anyway. So
too busy. I think we make ourselves too busy. But I would say that Peggy and I have tried to do that, and I think we have made some headway. And then again, Kim and I just talked about it this morning. And what do we do to bring them together more?
Sure. Well, you mentioned Kim. That's Kim Meredith.
Yep.
She's fairly new to the agency.
The insurance lady.
The insurance lady. And obviously you have a lot of people that work here.
Yeah.
But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ken Rhoden,
Yes.
who used to work
Yep.
here. Great man.
Yep.
Most people know him, but I want to give you an opportunity to just pay tribute to him real quick.
Yeah. In fact, I just reached out to Teresa just the other day, his wife. Ken started in 1999 here. Was 2 years into his retirement when he had a sudden heart attack, and I mean we were all shocked.
Yeah.
I had seen him earlier that week. We were working on Rob Helm's account that day, and he'd met with Rob that morning. Ken had called into the office probably 2 or 3 times. We were kind of transitioning, so I was working with him on some of those accounts, trying to, learn all the things that you needed to know. And so we'd spoke at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was actually sitting at the courthouse waiting for election results when I found out. Actually, one of his players drove by, saw me, called me, and I just heard from Chris Sheets, who called and said, what had happened. And I was like, what? Yeah, I mean, it was just like...
Didn't seem real.
No, I mean, literally 2 hours before that, he was talking to him.
Right.
And, he just probably had a blockage or something. And Teresa said he just didn't feel well, but she thought he was winded from, he'd been out for his walk. He was walking. I mean, he looked great. He dropped some weight and was... look pretty good, and so it's unfortunate because we really anticipated that he and Teresa were going to have a long time to enjoy that retirement and those grandkids. So that was unfortunate, but his story, I'll just throw this in.
Sure.
If people that know Ken know he is very regimented. He's very loyal, and he and I were on a couple committees together, and we'd see each other. And I'd say, how things going, and he'd tell me. And he was working for another agency. And one day he was like, I'm struggling a little bit, and it just wasn't a mesh. And I said, well, if you ever decide to change, call me. A couple days later, I get this phone call, and he says, is that offer still available? And I go, yeah, why? And he says, I quit, which is totally uncharacteristic of him. I mean, and I went, what? And he's like, yeah, I just quit. And there was lots of reasons.
Sure.
And I said, when do you want to start? He goes, when can I start? And we were downtown still, and I'm like, well, your office is full of trains right now, so I'm going to have to get all of those out. It was a whole office, and it was floor to ceiling stacked with boxes of rubber totes full. I said, I need a week. And so sure enough, and then it was, we hit the ground running. And again, we're kind of opposites. He was more, a lot of his clients came from the sports world and where he coached, and and mine were more political and other business people. But it was just an unbelievable mesh. It worked very well, and I couldn't have been happier. So
I believe he's the epitome of someone that was a true Morgan County, I wouldn't say maybe hero, but just a Morgan County, what's the word I'm looking for? A staple in the community.
Yeah.
He brought the two communities together in a lot of ways.
He did, and it was funny because everybody knew about what he had done from an athletic. He played high school basketball and football at Martinsville. His brothers had played. He went on to coach. He won some state championships. Very successful. Lots of successful athletes that have gone on to do a lot of things. But when I was at the funeral service, I said to his brothers, I said, I don't think you guys know, he was in charge of a mentoring program at Indiana Insurance when he was there. He started in the mailroom, and he was a vice president of commercial underwriting when he retired.
Oh, wow.
So started at the bottom, worked his way up, and was very successful. But Indiana Insurance had a mentoring program where they would bring people out of college, or like if I had a child and I wanted them to go into the insurance business, I could send them there. They'd start them in the mailroom, work them through the claims department and all this. And so I said, you don't know how many hundreds he's mentored that are vice presidents, presidents of insurance companies.
Wow.
I mean, we used to joke about it. They'd come in and to call on our office, and they didn't know he was here. And they'd walk in and they go, oh, Ken. And I go, another trainee? And they go, yeah. and so it really was funny because these guys rose to be pretty big in a lot of the insurance companies. And his brothers, and even Teresa said, I knew he did it, but he never really talked about what he did at work. And I'm like, it was a whole different world.
It was.
From the sports stuff.
From the athletics, yeah.
Which they were together doing that all the time.
Right.
And he just didn't really talk about the other much. So, yeah, very, very influential guy. And I would walk down the hall, and I said to Teresa not too long ago, I said, the only problem with walking down the hall to ask Ken a question was it was never going to be a 2-minute answer. But that was also the beauty of it, was you found out how his softball team had done, or little Arties, or some, and so it was always, and knew a lot of people. Kim is a lot like him in the fact that she just knows everybody, and he knew everybody, and so even though I've lived in Martinsville since 1985, there's people that I meet, and I'll find out they're related to somebody that I've known for a long time, and I'm like, I didn't know that. So, yeah.
Well, a few more questions before we wrap up. Obviously, you're Peggy Mayfield's husband. She's a state representative. How does it feel to be the spouse?
Well, I tell people that, I used to be Dean Mayfield, owner of Mayfield Insurance, and then I became Michael Mayfield's dad, and now I'm just Peggy Mayfield's husband. And, we laugh about it. I said, I used to have my own identity, and people, respected me for what I did, not, the fact that I'm tagging along with you. In fact, it's funny you say that, because I texted the guy last night, and I said, what time does IU play Saturday? And he told me. And he said, well, we're doing a thing downtown on Tuesday. I said, well, Peggy's not available. And he said, well, the only reason we invite you is because you get to tag along with her. And he was kidding. And I told her that, and she looked, and I said, I know he's kidding, but he's really not, So, yeah. But it's fun.
It's like I say, when I texted you to ask if you to do this interview, you said, you realize this is Dean, right?
Yeah, really me? Yeah. I'm like, what do you, really?
So I want to do a speed run with you. I want to ask you one more question. What specifically is the biggest lesson you've learned about business and people?
Well, again, don't judge a book by its cover. And
that's right. Go back to that.
Yeah. I mean, that was an important lesson, because I I did judge some people that came in and just didn't want to wait on them.
Right.
You know, I'm like, the guy's dressed a little nicer. I'm going to go wait on him. And
Right.
And Jack would say, well, I just sold that guy 4 suits. I go, the guy with cow poop on his boots? He goes, yep. And then I started noticing that those guys, they would only come in like a couple times a year. But when they came in, they bought a bunch.
They were stocking up?
They were stocking up, yeah. So that was a lesson, yeah.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
All right, speed round. Here we go. Favorite pizza chain?
Chain? Well, CC.
Favorite local pizza place?
Tomato pie.
Favorite Mexican restaurant?
Don't have one.
You don't like Mexican food?
No.
Wow.
I'm not.
All right.
The one on the square.
I learned something
The one
new.
on the square, if we're going to go have Mexican, which everybody else in my family loves, is where we'll end up at.
Okay.
So I don't even know the name of it.
I learned something new. I think you're talking about Los Reyes.
Los Reyes, yes.
All right. Favorite car wash place?
Mike's.
All-time favorite restaurant in Morgan County?
All time in Morgan County. I probably should say gather around because they're clients, but sorry, Kevin, I can only eat so much barbecue.
Yeah. It's a hard choice.
It is a hard choice.
I'll let you name 2.
21. I really enjoy 21 North because of the unique food that they have.
Yes.
And I'm not a unique kind of, I mean, Peggy would tell you, I'm a picky eater. I'm less picky than I used to be, mostly because my boys, they like to.
Expanded your horizons,
they,
yeah.
They eat, they'll eat anything. But I kind of like it. It's a little bit unique.
Yeah.
Second would be, I don't know. I like Morgan's for breakfast and Morgan's for, well, they only do breakfast and lunch, but it's home cooked, and I can get beef Manhattan, which I can't get at home most of the time.
There you go. Morgan's, okay. Favorite all-time restaurant in the whole state?
In the whole state. Hyde Park.
Really? Okay. Favorite Italian restaurant? Notice all my questions are about food.
Yeah. Well, it was Iaria's, but since it's changed who's running it, I don't really have a favorite Italian. There's one in Broad Ripple that's pretty good. I can't remember the name of it.
So it's really not Mexican, really not Italian.
I like Italian, but but there's not really a good.
Your go-to place.
Yeah.
Coke or Pepsi?
Neither.
Really? Sweet or unsweet tea?
Neither.
What's your preferred drink? Water. We'll leave it there.
Water.
Thank you very much.
Red wine.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for a great interview.
Yeah.
And thanks for being willing to sit down with us and tell us your story. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.